are walking by, I'll be out there and wave to you.
Where are we? Moving to department heads, on to our attorney.
I'm glad that the chairman of the planning board is here. I just want to mention to the board that I've been talking with Greg on an issue that we really discussed, I discussed with the board several years ago.
Recording stopped.
And that is that we're talking about PDDs. There is one PDD that we have in the village that does not appear in our code book. There was a resolution made on May 24th, 1971 by trustee Cahill saying that they moved that the zone change from R1 to planned development be made on this property to be developed in accordance with the wishes of the village board and the planning board, whatever that means, because it's not in our code anywhere. And this is the Canton Woods area, that whole development, which is a planned development. What I would suggest to the board is that the matter between Greg and the planning board, that they take a look at it and kind of see, come back to the village board and determine what sort of possible rules there might be, and then perhaps talk with representative of the Syracuse Home to see what should be done. But I really recommend to the board that specific rules be put in place, because the only rules that there are is that it be developed in accordance with the wishes of the board and the planning board.
So we need to codify our wishes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I said, I've been talking with Greg about that.
Their wishes.
No, they're
50 years ago.
I missed that meeting in 1971, so I really can't tell you what went on, but
I wasn't even in the state.
at any rate, but Greg and I have been going back and forth on this, and so I think it should be, I think the planning board should take a look at it, and we can go from there. Other than that, I'll stick with the agenda.
Village clerk.
I just wanted to respond to Sally regarding the agenda. It is on the website, it's just under documents. It's not in the calendar part. We did have an issue yesterday putting it on. It's under documents, it's just not on top. It's like below 11.3 instead of above 11.3. But the agenda is listed, and we have an email into our website provider and to find out why we weren't able to put it on top, but we just had to scroll down. And certainly, if anyone is looking for an agenda, just give the clerk's a call, and we'd be happy to tell you what's on it. It's done by 1 o'clock on Wednesday, prior to the meeting. Otherwise, I'll stick to the agenda.
Well, maybe we can, after it gets posted to the website, do like a link or something from our Facebook page so people could get to it more easily. Just saying, here's the agenda for tomorrow's meeting.
Right, okay.
On the Facebook page, and then anybody following that will get more people to follow us on Facebook.
That's right.
Okay.
At least Sally will.
Okay, moving along to our treasurer department, so Mike.
Yeah. Just a couple things, the budget's in process. Remember, the due date is December 1st, but I'll certainly take it before that if you have it. I've met with Canton Woods and I've met with DPW, and both really productive meetings, so I'm happy to spend time with you if you have questions or want advice. I know Chief Leffenchuk has also called me about a couple things where he was looking for stuff too, so I'm more than happy to do that, so feel free to reach out. I'm trying to get a revenue first pass together to send to people instead of kind of last year, we kind of did it at that work session, but I'd like you to have some ideas of where we are beforehand. So more to come on that. There are budget modifications on the agenda for tonight. Any questions, feel free to ask. There are a couple more coming with bigger project-related things that are we will have ready for you by the December 1st meeting. We're just working through where those things are going to get modified. And you should have the first time that this happened, the abstract process in your documentation that you got tonight. So any feedback on that, we would love that, because we're kind of, we poked around to a couple reports, but it's just important that you get the information, and then if you want to give us feedback on what worked for you, what didn't work for you, then we'll go from there and kind of fine tune the process. So, and that is all, unless there's questions or agenda.
Mark, we've all seen the modifications that we're going to approve later on, I assume. When we get to that point, do you want to go over them for the public?
I'm happy to do that. Yeah,
'Cause otherwise
because
we're just
they're
voting.
really straightforward. These ones,
Yeah.
they're not complicated, and there's nothing nefarious in there or anything like that. It's just really business as usual. But and it's kind of the process of the way this works.
I just think it'd be better to be transparent.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just say something? Just so Mark knows that in talking with the chief and with Chuck, both are very pleased with the conversations they've had with Mark. Feel very comfortable that he's had answers and leading them in the right direction. So that's good to hear.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Now we'll move on to Ruth in the senior center.
Okay. Just one more reminder for folks that might want a home delivered meal on Christmas Day. The deadline is December 2nd, so please call Nancy Sullivan at the Senior Center to request that meal. Also on December 2nd, we have our tree lighting ceremony. The village singers will be there, holiday refreshments, and then we light our tree outside on the property. So come by for that. And also December 2nd and 3rd is our craft show, open to the public between 10 and 3. So come on in and see what our folks have been working on all year. And important date, on December 7th, 11 a.m., Mary Beth Basha from National Grid will be at the Senior Center. She is a senior consumer advocate. Mary Beth has been doing this job for many, many years and is a wealth of information. So if you have any questions, concerns about your heating, she is aware of any programs that might be out there to help you and assist you. So please make time on December 7th, 11 a.m. to come by and get any help that Mary Beth could offer you. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions. Okay, thank you.
That brings us to the superintendent of public works, Chuck.
The water department is still trying to finish up the water meters on the south side. We're having some difficulty getting in some of the homes. We've notified them many more times than usual, and it's slowly going forward, but houses that we cannot get into, our only thing that we can do is terminate the water service, and that usually gets us right in. But we try not to go that far, so if we leave flyers on your doors, we'll talk to you, we'll certainly work with you, but it doesn't cost us anything to let us in and change the meters. But we have a handful that it's just kind of difficult to get into. But if you will, just let us in, we'll be in and out before you know it. They're also on the south side of the river. They just finished up servicing all the fire hydrants over there. They'll be moving over to the north side soon. We had a few complaints of brown water, which does stir the water up a little bit, but everything's fine. They're just, we service them so the fire department can get on them and make sure they're greased and make sure they operate properly. And we're running through doing that at this point. We've also just finished up in the last week or so the project with the water leak under the creek there on East Oneida Street. We had the new water line run around that's taken care of. We've got a blacktop. That's done. That project went very well. We were on East Genesee Street today. We dug a couple of sewer taps up there and ran some new taps in. We were thrilled to get them done today. The weather didn't look like it was cooperating, but we tried to get it done when we could still blacktop the road before the plant closed down. That worked out very well. The state was good to work with on that, and that project went well. We're still doing brush pickup. We're going to try to go through one more time and finally get ahead of it. It seems like they just all the leaves came down at once. And we've been through twice, and we're hoping to get through one more time, and it should take care of that. Also, we were up and took the Christmas tree down this week. that went very well. In the last 2 years, we've been hiring a crane, and that's just fantastic. The crane was there, I think, at 11 o'clock, and I drove up at 20 after, and they're just putting it on the truck. I mean, the crane picks it up, it's safe for the guys, lays it down in the truck. Before they were gone, we had a stump grinder there, they ground the stump, and then they topsoiled and seeded the spot, and when we left, it looked great. Thanks to Mike and the police department, we needed a little assistance getting down to the park. The tree was mailbox to mailbox. And we got Mike out there with his new car and lights there, so we thank you for that, because that would have been a struggle getting down without that, but that goes pretty much flawlessly when they help us, because people pay way more attention than the police. And we cut that down there, and all went well with that. Other than that, we're getting people signed up for the turkey trot and the parade of lights. So we have to have employees come in with the plow trucks. So that's an overtime thing. We bring in with the plow trucks to block the intersections off. And the first year we did that, I thought, well, this seems to be a little overkill. And to bring these big trucks out here and block the street, and right out front here, we had 2 of our plow trucks that a tractor trailer tried to get between them. And I thought, well, I guess that's a good thing that they have the bigger trucks here. And that happened. I couldn't believe it. And I was standing there and I asked him, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to get through here. I says, well, they're not moving the trucks. So that would have been a problem if they weren't there. So other than that, unless there are questions, we're good.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the codes officer. Correct.
I just have basically one thing. This time of year, we always ask residents to take their basketball goals and move them away from the streets. We know they use them in the summertime, but it's not safe for our plow drivers or other vehicles for that matter to have these in the street during the wintertime. And there's only a handful of them out there, but just ask that people be conscious of that and pull them back from the road, please.
You were finished. I know, this is quick, don't worry, this is quick. And winter is coming. One of the bigger complaints we get when we start plowing is people leave their garbage cans in the street. When the plow truck goes down, the cans can't be in the street. Because if you have 50 houses on the street, there's 50 times the truck goes in and out and it doesn't get plowed. And a lot of them get hit, people get upset. When it's snowing, just bring your garbage cans back into your driveway, into your right of way, so we can get by.
Sure, go right ahead. We're on to the police chief.
You sure, Greg? Okay. Apparently I yielded my time to the DPW superintendent.
The gentleman from the DPW.
Yes, apparently. As I mentioned last meeting, obviously our overnight parking is now in effect. I'd ask our residents and any visitors to the village not to park on the village streets from 1:30 to 6 or 6:30 in the morning. We issue warning tickets starting out, but then once it snows, we do have to issue regular tickets. So we'd ask you not to do that. And again, that's just so Chuck and his cadre of people can keep our streets clean. Sunday night, we had the house fire here right up on Oswego Street. Fortunately, everyone was able to get out of there. Worked well with the Balls Fire Department. And the Onondaga County Cause and Origin team came out, and members of our staff are working with them to determine what the cause of that incident was, and they're still working on that. I was talking with one of the officers today, was following up on that. And then this board had obviously authorized the purchase of some new in-car computers and some radios. Just wanted to report back on the status of that. The in-car computers are here, they've been installed, they've been operational in the cars, and the officers absolutely love them. They're designed for patrol vehicle usage, and those are working very well. The radios have been delivered, some have been installed, but we're working with the programmer now to get them all programmed for the proper radio frequencies, and those will be a big help to us as well. So really appreciate the board's approval of those, and grateful for that. Unless there's questions, that's all I have. Obviously, we're looking forward to the turkey trot on Thanksgiving Day, followed by our parade of lights. I know Trustee Seco is very involved in that, with the tree lighting following that. So Mike Lockwood, our lieutenant, is working on operational plans that we've had in years past, just to ensure that those are moving forward. Yep, there's an NFL game on tonight too, I think. And we have Lieutenant Lockwood and I met with members of the Kiwanis Club last Monday night, making sure that the plans for the race were good to go. So hopefully we're looking forward to a good event. And as Chuck said, his crew is very helpful to us in ensuring the safety for the participants for both those events. We can't plan for 100% safety for everyone, but we can just try and do as much as we can in those key areas, and having those big trucks is definitely a help to us and provides a level of safety and security for the people attending and participating.
Anyone have any questions for the chief? You want to expand it all on what Dick mentioned?
Sure. So the International Association of Chiefs of Police is made up of 33,000 members from 170 different countries, and there's 33 board seats, 26 of those for U.S. residents and 7 of them for international. And the new president was sworn in October. And John Letney's his name, from Thomasville, Georgia. And I had a conversation with him back in March, and he had asked if I would be willing to serve once he became president. He didn't make any promises there. He said he had a lot of people that he was going to consider. And then he called and asked if I would serve on the board. And so he's appointed me to that, and that's going to run through 2025. It's a 3-year commitment. It can be renewed, but we'll see how that goes. I'm just looking forward to the opportunity. I am the only person from New York State on the board that will be appointed. So I look forward to seeing what it's about, another monthly Zoom meeting to be involved in. But I think it's great to have a Central New York and a Baldwinsville person to represent us there and bring back information and feedback, since it is an international organization. And the deputy director and executive director regularly have meetings at the White House with legislative leaders and representatives of the president and vice president. So I think we'll have a lot of information and a lot of ability to, impart our thoughts and my thoughts to policing in general. So it's a great honor, and I really look forward to it.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the agenda. Pending business. We have a follow-up presentation scheduled by CDS Housing regarding the proposed Phillip Street project.
I'll just do the introductions. Good evening, James Trasher, CHA. We're the engineers on the project. We've been in front of you in the past. Patrick Pinkerton from CDS is here. I'll hand you out a copy of the schematic plan that was distributed previously to Greg, in the zone change application, and then to the planning board that they initially commented on. And then I'll let Patrick go into the conversation. So.
Thank you, James. So again, my name is Patrick Pinkerton. I'm Director of CDS Housing. Just to give a little bit of background on our organization and how we came up with this project. CDS Housing is a subsidiary of CDS Monarch. CDS Monarch is a mission-based service organization based out of the greater Rochester area. We primarily serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And part of our service offerings is we put together affordable housing developments that have a supportive component for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live independently, but with holistic supportive services so that they can have a high quality of life. So the proposal that we're putting before you today is a proposal for 70 units of affordable housing. 18 of those units would be reserved for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDD. And we have presented this preliminary plan to the state funding agency for IDD and secured $3 million in funding. And we have spoken with the other state funders, and they are optimistic about the project as well, in support of it. So what we're here before you today is to do a couple things. One, to answer any questions that you have about CDS as an organization and what we try to achieve with these developments, but to answer any specific questions that you have about this development. And then three, to ask for your authorization to move forward in the process, to engage with the planning board members, to go through the PDD process, at which point, as John Tonello stated, we would be under their guidance. It would really be a development district that would be open to whatever parameters the planning board thinks are most appropriate for this site specifically, but obviously for your broader community. And speaking to that point, I hope you'll see a little bit of that already reflected in our plans. And I think from some of the preliminary conversations we've had with the planning board, we have started to align with the priorities that they've stated to us, and having early discussions with the village. There was an emphasis on trying to meet different aesthetic priorities to make sure that we aligned with the broader neighborhood. And I hope you'll see that reflected in more of a townhome type style that we've tried to develop for the buildings that we're proposing. But again, all we're asking here today and in the subsequent meeting when the vote will take place is for authorization for us to continue along this process, to engage with the planning board on the specifics of the proposal. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you may have. I could speak on some concerns that have been mentioned to us in the past, if that's helpful, and talk about.
Expand on the 50-year commitment for that specific.
Sure. So the funding that we'll secure for this site will be state tax credits, state and federal tax credits administered by New York State Homes and Community Renewal. That's what all our deals are under. And as a component of that, we'll be under a regulatory agreement. That regulatory agreement is for 50 years with the state. There's no negotiating on that point. Every agency that gets funding for a development like this is locked in for that 50-year regulatory agreement. That means a couple very notable things for your review. One is the populations that we're proposing here, the style of building that we're proposing here, are all locked in and codified in that regulatory agreement. Another is we are held to a pretty strict standard, and there are annual inspections done by the state as well as our investors to make sure that we're adhering to different compliance and different guidelines and regulations. So in addition to any local or state codes, we would also be held to their standards for maintaining, repairing, things of that nature for the building, as well as any services that we state will be offering to these individuals. Those will also be codified in that regulatory agreement. So essentially what we present to you, and if we get what we're presenting approved, whatever is approved, that will be locked in as it is for 50 years under that agreement.
Does that transfer with ownership, or are you required to maintain ownership for the 50 years? Or
CBS is an organization that's been running since the late 70s. We own 6 of these developments and are building a few more. We own 2 in Cicero, New York. We have no intention of getting outside of this space. It aligns with our core mission as an agency. But yes, it would run with the property. If we were to sell it, the new owner would not have any ability to change any substance of that.
Do you have a process of, I don't know how to word the screening, selecting your tenants?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, because some of the samples that you provided, we know they have some issues in those other apartment complexes.
Understood. So, yeah.
I'd like to avoid that.
Absolutely. I completely agree, as would our agency. So yes, there are several steps. I'll speak first just to the IDD piece. We'll work with a local service agency, and they will provide the vetting process to make sure that the individual qualifies as an individual with intellectual and developmental disabilities who is eligible for their services. They get funding from the state, so they can only provide those services to people who are appropriate for that designation. But for the broader project in general, anyone who is to live in the project would have to meet certain criteria. The most notable one is the income criteria that we're putting forward here. And just to speak on that piece a little bit here, what we're currently proposing is a range of incomes from 30% up to 80% of area median income. Just to give a sense of that, this is considered by many as workforce housing. The reason is the individuals who come here will have income in most, if not all instances. However, they find themselves in income tiers where it's difficult for them to meet market rate rents and still be able to meet some of their other basic needs. So that will be the biggest screening criteria, is making sure they fall into those categories. But there are other screening criteria, and we have professional third-party property management firms who handle that, and they have to adhere to all of the state's guidelines of who is and is not permitted in these types of developments. There are certain criminal convictions that preclude you from living in these developments. I won't get into all the details, and honestly, I'm not a property management professional, so I shouldn't wade into that too far. But the main criteria we would be looking at would be if you are eligible for IDD services for those 18 units, and then for the other units, if you fall in the appropriate income tiers.
If a tenant moves out of your income bracket, they're up or down, are they then?
They can remain in the housing, but the unit still stays at that tier. So if they were to move out, the new individual or new household moving in would then have to adhere to it. So we wouldn't force them out of this housing if their income were to change, but at the time that they move, that unit would still stay at that income tier. So anyone new coming into that unit would have to adhere to it. And just to give
all the support materials that you sent to Greg, who Greg sent to us.
Yes, and I have some today just about CDS as an organization that I can share with the board after. And just to give a sense, I believe it's roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25,000 to low 70,000 for the range for a four-person household to be eligible for this housing. That obviously fluctuates as HUD releases different data as you get into new years, but that just gives a sense that a lot of the folks who live in these developments, they have income. They're just individuals that if they're out in the market, especially with some of the inflation that we've seen, they're put to very difficult choices. Can you afford rent and also afford your medication or afford your transportation? So that's really the main goal of this housing when it comes to the affordable piece, and then obviously the supportive piece is a big part for us as an organization.
I think in one of your supporting documents you suggested that certain number of units would likely not be people utilizing cars.
Yes, so the 18 IDD individuals, I don't want to paint a broad brush and say that none of them will drive. We certainly have folks who take advantage of our programs who drive. We have some IDD individuals who work for our actual agency and they drive to work. But I would say a notably smaller percentage of those folks drive. So of those 18, it's reasonable to assume that a notable portion of them will not drive. I don't want to state a specific number because it's, there's a spectrum, right, to the folks who are eligible for those types of services, but I would say less than the general population.
And do you actually help them get around the community, for services? Because like the grocery stores are on the other side of town. And
yes.
like that.
Yes, we do. So we'll be working with a service agency that we currently work with in Cicero, and that's one of the offerings that they'll provide to the individuals is they will have transportation services as well as a host of other services. And there will be, in addition to property management staff on site, a community manager as well as a maintenance employee. There will also be a case manager, if you will, with an office directly on site, working 40 hours a week on the site to be there for the needs of those individuals.
That's going to be available for everybody that's in that.
So property management serves every tenant.
Okay.
The service provider just is specific to the IDD population.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
Piggybacking off of Ruth, I mean, there's a lot of parcels that would be available to you in the village, in towns. Why are you selecting this property here at 19 Phillips Street?
Sure. One reason we've selected it is, given the size of it, we feel the 70 units that we're proposing isn't going to overpopulate it. It's going to allow us to keep some green space, some vegetation, some good buffers. A big reason that we've keyed in on it and see it as a very desirable state, and a reason that the state sees it as one as well, is because of its proximity to an excellent school district. Having that and having what we're trying to put together in this proposal, which is 2 and 3 bedroom units, so some folks with young children can have easy access, convenient, safe access to a quality school district, is a big priority for the state, and frankly, it aligns with our mission of what we're trying to achieve as well. And that's difficult to find. So a site of this size, with that proximity to an excellent school district, with the possibility for significant landscaping and appropriate buffering, that's a pretty good combination of factors to bring together.
We've heard from many of the residents concerned about traffic in that particular area. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I can, and I believe it's been circulated by Greg, but I don't know. We can certainly share it again. We did have a third party conduct a traffic study, and it was conducted during the school hours. And they came back with a clarification that they thought the impact of this would be minimal during the peak hours, that they see significant traffic, most likely from the school district. A couple things that may factor in to even reduce that further from the study is the study was done for 140 units, just to provide an abundance of caution, to be very conservative with it. But we are only asking for 70 units, and that's all we're asking for the village to provide approval for, and we would not have any as of right for 140. So even with the traffic study being double what we're proposing, the impact was minimal from the third-party professionals who reviewed it, and we can share that data with you. But a couple other points to speak to, like we were noting earlier, with the IDD population being 25% of the development, that does limit car usage to some degree. And we are also proposing in our current plan access points off Phillip Street and Oneida out of consideration for that, to try to lessen some of those immediate roadblocks and bottlenecks that may come about as a result of this. We understand that obviously if you're putting in new units, there are going to be some cars associated with that, but we did really dig into this issue, and in talking with the professionals who did the study, the strong indications from them were pretty definitive that this is an issue that is a result of the current street patterns and the fact that the school district is right there, so it has peak times where there's a bottleneck. And from their clarifications to us, they seem to be pretty strong in their opinion that we wouldn't really be exacerbating that, and not putting us there wouldn't really be alleviating that. We wouldn't really have a notable impact. But I assume you've seen it, but we can certainly.
I've seen it.
Okay. No, I understand. It's still a valid question even with the study. I just wanted to make sure it did get to you.
Anyone else have any questions? This is a presentation. It's not.
But I have questions.
Yeah, but you have to bring it to your next meeting.
Taking notes.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any? I mean, I keep forgetting you're over there.
No, most of the questions that I had were taken care of, all the ones that I was thinking of, so.
One other thing I will note, and I did just state it, but I want to be very clear with it. We are only asking for the authorization to go engage with the planning board, but we intend to engage the planning board for 70 units. Like I said, we've secured some state funding with our preliminary plan, and our preliminary plan only showed 70 units. That's all we're pursuing with the village. We showed 140 based off of some preliminary conversations with the village, and the village indicating, would there potentially be a phase 2 given the size of this site? So we went through the exercise of showing what a theoretical phase 2 would look like. We are by no means asking for a phase 2 at this point, and we would need to come back to you and start this process all over again from square one and get all of your approvals to do that. We're not trying to get any ability as of right to go to 140. We are only concerned with trying to get approvals to make it feasible for us to get 70 units on this site, which we feel is more than appropriate given the size of the site.
So, Bob, do they have to, or are they formally proposing a PDD?
Not really, they want to go to the planning board to come up with parameters to describe what a PDD would look like and come back.
Because right now, the motion is for an R2. That was the only motion.
Well, that was the local law that's before the board, which has not been acted upon, but I think what they want to do is to meet with the planning board and have the matter on their agenda so that they can come back to the board with proposals to either amend or come up with an entirely new local law. In any event, there would have to be public hearings before this board and new seeker determinations relative to any proposal. But they just want to be able to go to the planning board to discuss with them the project and come up with parameters that might fit into a description of the PDD.
Yeah, I think honestly from in the process, we want to start the formal process where the application is in, it goes to the board, you refer us over to the planning board, we work through the planning board on the process where then it comes back to you, where you adopt the legislation, and then we go do the project. The informal conversations back and forth, they really don't get us any further ahead. So, we initially put in an R2, we went based on conversations. So if we need to redo something right now in terms of the application process where it formally comes in, you look at it and you decide you would want to refer it, because it's a legislative action. You can make a decision, client isn't going to you could say no tonight and then we go away. They don't want to have it. They've invested time, the state's invested time, they think this is a great site, but they don't want to continue going down a process, expending money with surveyors, engineers, traffic folks, just to come back and say, oh, that was well and good. We had no intent of ever looking at this as a project. But from a standpoint in the use, it's come back from the planning board in an initial recommendation that they feel for this, a PDD is an appropriate use on the site, initially when they came back with the document they submitted to you. So we want to go through a formal process where you look at it, say, good, move on to the planning board, you work, if it's one meeting we can solve all their problems in, or if it's 25 meetings, we get those all resolved, we come back and you say, great job planning board, we love what you did. And you guys can come to the planning board meetings, but it really gives you guys the power and control between your board and their board to do it.
And I believe when we were at a prior meeting, just to give a little context, when we originally proposed it as R2, I believe the comments at a prior meeting were, if we go to a PDD as opposed to an R2, then to Mr. Tonello's point earlier, you would have greater latitude in what parameters you put on us, and whatever you approve for us is the only thing that's approved for this site, as opposed to if you opened it up to an R2, then if our project were to go away, someone else could come in with an R2 and build as of right. And I think that was the reason for that. But again, to Mr. Trasher's point, we can certainly resubmit paperwork to call it a PDD if that's necessary.
I'm just a little confused where we stand.
Yes, so
we're just looking for authorization to engage the planning board at this point. It wouldn't be a formal approval from you folks.
So you want to go just have an informal conversation with them like we've already?
No, I'm saying it would come back to them after we have those conversations, but we would need a formal authorization now to go there.
That was my question. The mayor's already said we're not voting on anything tonight.
Okay. So to the attorney, do we need to resubmit the application or request for zone change to a PDD that can be on the agenda at the next meeting that the board can consider for referral to the planning board to start the PDD process?
If that would, there's as I say, there's two ways to do this. One is a local law that's currently before the board that's been sitting there. There's a proposal to develop a project. I think the board could have or they could direct that the matter go back to the planning board to come up with the parameters for a planned development district. You've actually made the request verbally. I don't think you need to have an actual written request at this point.
So at the December meeting, we would be able to get a formal vote to formally refer us to the planning board for the PDD process to begin that?
Well, I think you could do that, yes, and then.
That's what we would, that's what we're before you asking for, is that in the next meeting in December, we get a formal vote to refer us to the planning board to go through the PDD process.
And I just wanted to take one step back. This currently is zoned R1. And so if we came in here as a developer came in and these guys said, okay, we're gonna scrap this, we're gonna come in at R1. You're gonna own those roads, you're gonna own the sewers, you're gonna own the storm systems. You know, there's a ton of infrastructure that's coming in that's gonna be the village. And typically most places don't want this stuff. You know, they want someone else to own, maintain, and take care of it. And this project where we're looking to bring this project in, if that was uncovered, that entire site, minus the curb cuts, is all privately owned and maintained. The roadways in are maintained, sanitary sewer connection point coming in, private sewers, storm system, privately owned and maintained. So from a benefit standpoint, you're getting taxes and you're providing police service and trash is taking care of them. So your cost is, you know, the roads you're currently plowing on Oneida, the roads you're plowing on Phillips. Is Phillips a village road or a county road?
Village.
So you're maintaining those and all the other stuff. So I'll just use this. When I was in here previously, when we were looking at an outside user agreement for Aspen Apartments, it was great, and I would hope the police chief wants to buy a new police car this next year, because the tax increase that they would do on this project can provide those benefits when you're looking at a budget, you know, where, you know, inflation is going up, costs are going up. You have a project like this comes in, your tax base, what you're going to get in terms of revenue, is going to increase versus what you currently have there. Where if you put a single family residential project in, your revenue is going to go up, but your expenses are going to go up, you know, sort of in the same manner. So with everything you need to do. So we believe that this is a good use for the piece of the property. You know, you need to make that determination. You know, I think from a PDD standpoint, the planning board has given some preliminary thoughts on what they would see, but they felt the PDD was appropriate, and we would just like your consideration of that and work through the process.
You're not going to be seeking any relief for taxes?
No, at this time, we have no request for tax abatement. We would bring a proposal before the town, if we were to before the village, if we were to receive an approval. Any abatement that we would ask for would still be significantly greater than what's currently received for taxes on the parcel as is. And one of the reasons that we would pursue that, it would still be the village's decision whether or not that would be approved, and it would be separate and apart from these approvals. But one reason we would pursue that is that does help our scoring with the state to secure the funding necessary for this, to show that the municipality has given an abatement, because that does show support from the municipality. So we often request it. It's the village's decision whether or not they would approve it, and that would be separate and apart from these approvals. And I will make note of the fact, again, that we have received $3 million in funding for this, and we have received some positive indications from the other state funders. And if fully funded, the construction itself would be north of $20 million of state funding that would come in for this development. And we do have a GC who oversees our process, but they work with local subs to build this. So there would be local jobs associated and income and money coming into the village as a result of this development. And then, as I stated, there would be 3 full-time on-site positions as well. So those are some other financial considerations.
And just to follow up on that, in regards to the IDA stuff, you can't go deal with Onondaga County without a letter of support from 1, the school district, and 2, from the village. You know, they won't move a project forward without that letter of support. So if there was a request to the IDA for a pilot mortgage recording tax and sales tax abatement on this, you know, the village would be requested for a letter. If you put a letter of non-support in, typically the IDA board, you know, doesn't approve certain things. So not to, you know, it's just, there's, you know, levels of protection for folks that, you know, we would have to come to you in that regards as well.
Would you need a certain level of abatement though to kind of make this happen? Because you wouldn't want to go through this whole process and then you need this money tied together and we're not going to provide it.
We could make a deal work without tax abatement. It's difficult. It's a bit of a challenge for these properties because our revenue is very tight, because they're affordable and they're rent restricted from the state funding that we get. So it is helpful, but honestly, the biggest consideration for us is if we have that tax abatement, that shows more than just a nominal commitment from the community. It shows that the community is, if you will, investing in it, so that it's clearly a priority for them. So that's something that helps us with the state scoring, which then in turn helps us secure the millions of dollars of capital funding we need, which is obviously the main consideration. So no, I would not say if we go through that process and the village denies that, that does not end our project, no.
All right, so procedurally, Bob, you said that we had the table from R1 to R2 local law that we haven't voted on yet.
That is correct.
Could we possibly vote on that and maybe set up a motion to have a public hearing for the next meeting for zone change from R1 to PDD? Maybe make that a part of the agenda tonight, just to get things going. I want to get some things taken care of.
Yeah, my only concern would be that people aren't prepared for that and would like to think a little bit about what they just heard. But if the whole group is in agreement with you.
Well, at least maybe just take the R1.
The thing is that when you zone, and this is the comment that I made earlier in the meeting with the PDD on Canton, where there's 2 words in a paragraph. You need to set parameters, and that's what the planning board would do. So I don't think you would not have a PDD piece of legislation to vote on because there wouldn't be any parameters as to what they are. If you want to adopt a resolution accepting the application for a planned development district and amending their prior application to change it to planned development district and then refer that to the planning board to come up with parameters, that's something you could do by resolution.
And would the cleanest, for me, the least confusing and cleanest way would be to vote down the request for the R2, or vote on it, I shouldn't say, it's not how people are going to vote, and then put forth a proposal to whatever the PDD referral process, whatever the wording you would need, and then vote on that. That's kind of what you suggested all in one paragraph when you sent out to us. You were, but I don't know if amending it is the way to go, or if just go clean slate and start over.
Well, I mean, you could just take a vote on the local law as proposed and deny the local law, and then accept the application for a planned development district and refer that matter to the planning board for a recommendation as to the parameters of the PDD legislation.
That sounds good, except there was one sentence you in your memo you sent out to us that was that if this board isn't going to support the PDD, we're wasting their time.
Well, that's what they just said. I think
we should, if we know we can't support that at all, then we need to cross that bridge. But I don't know if tonight's the night. I don't know where we're.
Can I just?
It's murky here.
So hopefully I can add some clarity to what you just said, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think was the clarifying point was that if you vote down the current item that's to R2 and you project the intent of the village board to decide on a change to a PDT, that would be what you would vote on, have a public hearing on at future meetings.
Right.
The determination then would then send it back to the planning board. The village board turning down, voting against a change from R1 to PDD would halt the process, right? As clearly as possible. And whatever decision that would happen. If the village board approves the change from R1 to PDT, it then comes back to the planning board for formal design planning, all that stuff, right? So, but the village board's responsibility basically is at that point of deciding yes to a PDD or no.
And then it comes back to us when the planning board's done with it to legislate a PDD, public hearings, that kind of stuff, or I don't know.
Normally,
I'll let Greg answer that piece.
our code requires that the plan, once it comes out of the planning board's approval, goes to this board for the adoption of the local law to change the zoning. But I guess what the developer is asking for is for a recommendation from this board saying that it's okay to go to the planning board to look at a PDD, or is this board going to be completely against any rezoning of this property? So that's, I guess, where we need to get to.
So shy of us approving a PDD, you're asking for permission to communicate with the planning board to create the parameters of a PDD that we would vote on.
Basically.
The only way, and Greg, you can correct me if necessary, the only way you would be voting down referring us to the planning board for a PDD is, to Greg's point, if you just, regardless of what this project ends up looking like or what any project would look like, you would not entertain a rezone of this to anything, because the PDD, to Mr. Tenello's point, would give the planning board broad latitude to put whatever parameters on us they see fit.
So with the faith that we have in the planning board, I think that if we didn't agree to a PDD, but put it back into their court to let them communicate, to present us with something that we could consider, that would keep the ball rolling.
Correct. And that would allow us to make sure that the work that our design professionals are doing is relevant and necessary. And
When is there a public hearing on a PDD, or is that process
That would
take
be when
place
the
at
local
the
law is
planning board?
prepared and submitted for a vote, and the public hearing on the local law.
Right.
But so after board meetings are all public.
Yeah, it's after the planning board has something to present to you.
But people could come to planning
Oh,
board
absolutely.
meetings and interact.
Yes, and there would be
ask questions.
the planning board would call a public hearing before they would approve anything as well. So there's different layers of public hearings.
Well, we don't want to just keep the ball rolling too, like you've said before. If we're not going to, let's not make them go through that process of.
If there's 4 of us on this board that are gonna.
I don't want to vote on anything tonight. I'd like to definitely think things over and think this project through, because I don't want to jerk them around and make them come back, and we don't want to just keep the ball rolling.
But with the exception of the stuff that we've seen,
Yeah.
nobody really here knows what input the planning board's gonna have on your original submission as far as your plan goes.
Right.
Correct.
Because I certainly wouldn't want to vote before the planning board had a full chance to chime in on their thoughts and what would work in the village.
Right.
So, shy of telling you.
So the planning board hasn't seen the reduced, modified?
What we did is provide the village board with the broad parameters based on
Yeah, we saw it.
not just this project, but in general.
We
for
saw, yeah,
PDD.
the thing, recommendations for PDDs, period.
The bottom line, though, for this is yes or no. Like,
Yeah.
to your point, do you want to change it or don't you? That's the crux of the matter. Because if there's, we as a village don't want the developer to go through a whole process, all that, only at the very end to go, no, we don't like it. So
The PDD is substantial development. I mean, it's very detailed and it's a lot of work.
And this parcel lends itself to needs to be a PDD, regardless of what kind of development took place in there, I would think.
Right.
But if we're greenlighting a PDD, are we essentially not greenlighting the entire process? Because at that point, it's gonna go to you for.
because the PDD By greenlighting a PDD, you're basically saying the village wants more control over development on that parcel, which is actually much more than an R1. This is what I alluded to at the very beginning.
And by referring to you, are we,
because then it goes through, you have
putting an approval, or are we saying, no, we want that expert
you have
body to
said
look
that
at it?
this is appropriate use in the village's eyes for this particular parcel, and you're authorizing the planning board at that stage and the developer to really get down to brass tacks and present something. You're giving sort of a tacit approval is the exact phrase I was going to use, that this is something that the village would like to see.
We would still need their final approval at the end of what it actually looks like after going through the process with you. So you would still have final authority at the end of the whole process.
And there would be public hearings and approval processes within the planning board ahead of that. So, but to that point of, if you want to leave it as is, that's an action, and there you have legislative action pending on that. If there is an action to, well, now that we see Micron coming, other development, we want more control over this particular parcel, we want to make it a PDD. That would give not just this developer, but any future developer an opportunity to say, hey, this is something we want to propose. If your real intent, though, is not to have any development other than R1, I think that's something that you can take care of very quickly. Not necessarily tonight.
Yeah, the other thing too is that the board would actually be saying to the developer, yes, this is something we definitely will consider. There may be some objections and concerns by neighbors. The reason that the planning board would be taking a look at it is that they would be hearing those concerns. And for example, if there's issues about traffic that can be alleviated, that's something that would be put into the plan. If they can, if there's questions about barriers and what can be done to avoid any noise or any other situation, that's something that goes into the site plan. You know, and if the village board says, well, we don't want anything more in there than a dozen houses, and that's all we really want, then I think that's a decision that the board should make before they do go into all of this. But I think as far as the concerns about the rezoning into PDD with this particular project, if it's something that the board says, you know, if we can get rid of all of the concerns that everyone has, this is something that's worthwhile for the village. We have village residents, seniors perhaps, that can't afford where they are, that could move into this project, and that's something that the board can consider.
Mr. Mayor, I'm thinking that the board is not prepared to vote, as you had said, on this. I'm hearing people might want to think about it a little bit, but I don't know what your thoughts are.
No, that was my thought ahead of time, that there would be enough stuff brought up tonight that people would have a lot to digest. And rather than make a decision tonight feeling pressured, if it's 2 weeks to the next meeting, at that point, kind of get a feel for what the board feels and go in that direction. If it's no on anything, they know. If it's yes on something, then they know.
But we need a fish or cut bait.
Right. Yes. Yeah, right. So it gives everybody.
It's been bouncing around long enough.
Right, but you've heard maybe some new things tonight that you hadn't heard before. It may not change any minds, I don't know. But I know that I would feel very pressured to vote tonight if I had a vote. So that's my thought.
So work for you, gentlemen?
Yes, absolutely.
We'll put the pressure on us that in 2 weeks we'll be doing something.
No, all I will request is if you do have additional comments or questions, or even if you hear a comment from a resident that you don't know the answer to, please reach out to Greg and I can get it to you.
Thank you.
Will do.
Yeah, and I will leave some resume packets that let you know a little bit about CDS, but thank you.
Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Do we have to vote on the R1 to R2 though?
Well, I mean, at some point, you have to do something with it.
First meeting in December.
Yeah, let's put that on the agenda, I guess. Thanks, Mom.
I'm fine with voting on the R2 issue, but.
Okay, moving on to new business. We do have new business too. Can I have a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the Baldwinsville Meals on Wheels Extended Facility Use Agreement for the period commencing on January 1, 2023 for a period of 1 year?
I'll make a motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Item B, motion to approve the discussed budget modifications that were forwarded to us by our treasurer. Yep. Do we have a motion? I'll make the motion.
Second for discussion.
Okay, now,
All right, you should all have it, you should all have this one that was in your packet. Let's just talk about the three proposals really quickly. Proposal 1 is a modification because the Justice Court received a grant from the state, from JCAP they call it, Justice Court Assistance Program. That's where these chairs came from in here. And I think the enhanced sound system is a result of the JCAP grant also. And so we raised the revenue side budget so that we can spend that money that we got, and we raised the expense side so that they don't exceed their budget because they got money to spend on it. So that's proposal 1. Proposal number 2 is increasing the police overtime budget because that budget has been exhausted again, and so that is money that we're taking from the salaries budget, which is, there is some slack in the salaries budget, but I will advise you that I think the chief and I talked about some of that was put in that budget in anticipation of retro pay on a contract settlement with the union. So we'll keep you advised if we start to get into that territory, but for now, that's what that is. So we take from the salaries line and we give to the overtime line. And the third one is the continuing facade grant. And there are 2 lines that were added to the budget for that. One was a revenue line where we get money from the county to reimburse either contractors or business owners for enhancements to their facades in the village. So there's a revenue line for that. That's a reimbursement grant. The expense line of that is Greg manages that process when they have completed the work on their facade. They submit to Greg all the information about that, and they have to prove that they met the terms of the grant program, and then it gets submitted to the county, and the county reimburses us, and we pass the money back to the merchant or the contractor. There is a difference between those 2 lines. When you see the revenue and the budget side, there's a difference of, I don't know, $40,000 or $42,000, which is the
$41,809.
$41,809 estimate. No, and that's the Kinney Drug facade improvements that took place. And those, thank goodness for the mayor, because this was before my time in this role, but there's a bond that we have that's in another account that there is funding in there that was designated to pay for that. So that should resolve that additional, that gap, I call it, that's in there. And that will be coming to you at the next meeting. I pulled out the paperwork on the bond and the account on the bond, and right now I'm just kind of reconciling, there are 7 or 8 things that were spent out of that bond, including the paving the parking lot here, and I think doing some road striping and a couple other things, maybe insulation for the police department side of the building. But I want to be able to come to you. You passed a resolution last year, I think, to be able to change the appropriation in that bond. And I want to be able to come to you and tell you, this is where the whole thing stands in these 8 categories or whatever, and what's been spent and where we're at, and here's what we need to spend on the Kinney facade improvements, and so that you're making a qualified decision on that. So that's the story on those 3. If you have any questions.
No, but I appreciate your going over them.
Yeah, thanks. All right, my pleasure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Oops, looking at my phone. Item C, motion authorizing the mayor to sign the amendment to the municipal cooperation agreement for the school resource officers for the 22-23 school year to add 2 special patrol resource officers, SPROs.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, did you want to add anything, Mike?
No, Bob has reviewed this, it's gone back and forth with Bob and the district's attorneys, and we're finally getting this rectified.
And it has been executed by the district.
Yes.
The acting superintendent has signed it.
You did, and I appreciate the board's approval.
Okay.
Can I point something out about that too? It's our intention at the end of this year, because we generally bill the schools at the end of February, which is also the end of our fiscal year. It's our intention to put that as a receivable on our books. The reason I bring that up is that may mitigate some of the proposal number 2 items in here about the police salaries and that, because we're spending money right now to pay these officers, and we're not being paid back for it until, we probably won't get the money until March, but if we can get it on our books in February, then it'll have less impact on our budget.
And because obviously this agreement came about after our budget had been enacted. So there was no money budgeted by this board, so it had to come from somewhere, so it's been coming out of the overtime line. And so that's one of the issues with that line. I had a nice conversation with Mark the other day, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a separate line in next year's budget for this, for these positions. So obviously, any money expended out of that line will ultimately be reimbursed by the villages, as Mark just explained, being reimbursed to the village by the district. But that SPO line will just be those positions alone. So that way it'll be a little bit cleaner, and we can see what the cost of that is and then what's being reimbursed by the school district there. So I had mentioned that to public safety before this meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Item D, discussion possible action regarding the Restore New York grant program. Did we lose our...
No, he's back.
Okay. And we've kept Greg here too. So, what's the discussion?
Could you explain very briefly the program, the plans that you guys are talking about, and what the Restore New York program provides you?
Sure thing. This is Joe Dem here with the Hinge Group Real Estate. We are looking to start the schematic design for the 18 acres behind the Baldwinsville Garden Center. I'm working with the ownership team of Baldwinsville Town Center LLC, and we are going through the process to try to submit a Restore New York grant. So Governor Hochul put out the first Restore New York application a couple months ago, and Restore Round 2 is upcoming with a November 30th deadline for an intent to apply, with the full application due at the end of January. It would be a $2 million grant that would run through the village of Baldwinsville. And right now, we are working on some schematic designs, but it would be a mixed-use development project with housing and retail as well. So we're hoping the mayor could authorize his signature. It's a very simple one-page document for the letter of intent to apply, and then we would take the next 2 months to work on the detailed application itself.
And just to update the board a little bit, we found out about this project about a week, I think it was a week ago today. And the Restore New York program, well, I at least know that it exists. Had not had any real occasion to look into it because nobody had approached us to use anything like that. So at this point, and Bob Baldwin can, clear it up if I'm wrong here, if I get this off base a little bit. What we would authorize by signing this document is just to tell the state, basically, there is a group that has an intent to use the Restore New York to take care of a project. And more will be coming when they apply in late January. So it doesn't really commit too much yet. It's really to sort of secure a seat at the table, looking for some of that money. Now, to Joe, I will tell you that I know that some of our board members and other officials are a little concerned about if the grant goes through, you apply in January and you get this grant, how much of the operating of the contracts and stuff is going to be pushed onto the village to secure, to make sure that they get handled, that the money gets spent the way it's supposed to, because there is some concern about that this could be an overwhelming job for somebody in our village to have to undertake. A lot of our people, our treasurers, a part-time employee, our DPW clerk, who would be capable of something like that. She works part-time. She's already panicking, thinking if it's her job to shepherd all this stuff through and to keep track and track down people who are supposed to get her paperwork and stuff. So, we have some concerns about how much of the responsibility of carrying out this program will fall on us. We're not familiar with it. I'm planning tomorrow to send out emails to all the mayors in the county just to see if anybody else has been a part of this program, to see the extent of their involvement. I have not heard too many people that have used it. I know it's a fairly new program. So, Bob Baldwin, am I right in saying that if we sign this and send it in by the 30th, that this will really have no obligation on our part other than to tell the state somebody is going to approach you looking for Restore New York money?
That is correct. And if you don't, then there is no ability to participate in the grant. So this is basically saying we're interested, and if we want to move forward with more details, we'll see in January. If we're not, we won't.
Yeah. So I want the board to be clear on that, to understand that we can get some information from people who have tried to use the program or whatever, and find out that maybe this is something we really don't want to get involved in. That it's going to be backbreaking on our part, and if it gets screwed up, we would be the ones responsible, blah, 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 blah. So I don't want to get us into something that's going to cause us problems. On the other hand, if it's something that is not going to be that way, all we do is sort of like sign a paper every so often that they hit another milestone, whenever it happens, and it can encourage the development of a property that's just sat there for a number of years, then so be that. So I would say to you, to me, the recommendation would be that we make a motion to file the initial paperwork with Restore New York to indicate the intent, that somebody has an intent to develop, a property using this program, and know that we may not do any more than that. But at least we kind of like, we'll do that and we kind of step back and take a look and see where that leaves us. So I think that makes you feel any more comfortable. And Joe's here, if anybody has questions on, I'm assuming that they've looked into the Restore New York program a little bit, so they might have answers to some questions you might have. Also, if you have questions on the project. It's an interesting project. I know that Dan Caholen has brought to Greg Humphreys 2 or 3 different times plans for what he has been thinking down there, and there were some medical possibilities and maybe doctor's offices or emergency place. I mean, yeah, it's got some nice possibilities. And it's being geared to a little older crowd, I think, isn't it, Joe? Like 55 and older, or is that one of the possibilities?
The possibilities, we're kind of discussing that internally right now is, what is the demographic, what's the makeup of the housing? But just if I could, I think you make a good point. This really does just secure a placeholder. And then over the next couple months, working on the application, talking with your team. Lydianne West, who's our grant writer, who would be engaged for this, she could talk with you further on, what the reporting requirements are. We've now submitted 3 Restore New York grants. This is round 9, I believe, so it has been around for quite a while. Leanne has worked on various other municipalities as well. So purely, if we could just get it in, we'll sit with you again and talk through any questions you guys might have.
Okay, if you could give her information, email me her information.
Absolutely.
So I can contact her. The more I know, the more I can tell the board. And, these are the kind of things that again, they're new to us. And I don't want our board to be uncomfortable making decisions on things they don't know enough about. And so, if I can talk to her, she might be able to, us put down some of our fears.
In moving forward, I would just, also, we should make a determination as to how this application is going to be created. That is to say, who's going to assume responsibility. It's only 1 page, but among other things, you have to have the estimated project cost, you have to have the full description of the properties, and a brief project description. And I would assume that the village would work closely with the grant writer for doing this. But if we're going to move forward, and it would appear that we should, then I think the individuals who are going to take responsibility or given responsibility for making sure that it goes through, whether it's Greg or whether you want me to do it, whoever, to coordinate with the developer, just to make sure that everything gets created and filled out correctly, and then put in by the due date. I don't want to be in a position come December 1st that somebody says, gee, I thought you were going to do it.
Good. And I think it's good for you to do it, Bob. I think you're the right person. So, and if he has me, have their grant writer contact me, I'll make sure that she either gets a hold of you or gets me the information that you'll need for the application. And all we need tonight is we be voted on once we get that application put together for me to sign it.
In writing this grant, do you have to have like a scope of the project, what it is exactly?
So at the 1 page that we're discussing now, very high level. By the time we get to the final submission in late January, we'll have a pretty narrowed down scope of the project. What we do, because we've done a couple of these applications where we're shovel ready, and we've done others where we're similar to the beginning stages like this. We tend to underestimate the project costs because you always want to make sure you're going to, spend what you say you're going to spend. So we'll go into it with maybe a lighter version of what the project could be. But of course, obviously working with your group and, the back and forth of what the project we choose and that path is chosen will be determined in the next 2 to 3 months.
And this area is zoned industrial, if I'm correct, Greg?
Industrial, it has elements of industrial, commercial, and R1.
Okay.
And from what I gathered from Dan Gaholen is that he would be looking to combine the parcels that would be included in this, and then it would have to go for a zone change to a planned development district.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions?
We also, Mr. Mayor, if we get that far, and I'm not sure what Bob's workload is, but we have an engineer that's very familiar with these projects, and maybe he could look into some of this for us also.
And we've worked with Leanne previously, and she does a ton of Geddes grants, so we're very familiar with her, so if you'd like us to get involved, we'd be happy to.
And then,
I have one question. In the January application, are you going to be looking for some sort of an approval of your project for the grant funding? Because it sounds like it's a zone change, you know.
The approvals don't have to be enhanced. You know, there's questions on there about seeker. You just have to show the timeline of the process. As far as having the approvals in hand, it is not needed. There will have to be a public hearing that would authorize the mayor to submit the final application, but the approvals do not need to be in hand.
The state has come out with some very detailed regulations as to how to proceed with the application.
I was just curious if we need to get planning board approvals or any planning board at least input or anything like that, or town or village board approvals that, you know, any plans need to kind of come to the board too. So you're not sitting there in January all of a sudden having a project that, you know, doesn't.
I think the application, the approval would be, on the application, would basically be subject to the ultimate approval, because as I say, you've got seeker issues, you've got other issues, so this is just a funding request, just like applying for mortgage approval, pre-closing mortgage approval, and that's kind of what's happening here.
That is correct.
Is it correct to, this grant doesn't require any matching as far as the village is concerned? It looks like it's just apply for it and...
It's a reimbursement, so you have to spend the money, but Restore, I think you can go up to 90% of the project cost. This is limited to $2 million, so we would be, you know, plenty through that. But there's no matching requirement in specific that we can't hit here.
Yeah, there's a 10% requirement.
Could I make a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the letter of intent to apply for the Restore New York grant?
I'll make one.
Oh, I just made it. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, now is there more discussion?
No.
I'm sorry, I get hung up on protocol.
Appreciate that.
We've had the discussion.
Okay,
Yeah, we've had discussion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Guess you have something to do, Dick.
Yep.
Carried.
Thanks for coming on and joining in with us, Joe.
Thanks.
Mayor, thank you all, and I'll get that email to Leanne tonight with the option.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Miller.
The next item is a motion to pay bills as audited.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Discussion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:00 something.
9:03. Moved.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
Second on that.